Good morning, good afternoon, good evening everyone. We have some breaking news on our Defcon level system. Northern Command, Southern Command, Africa Command, Indo-Pacific aka Indonesian Pacific Command and Cyber Command are still at a 3 and the Space Command is still at a 4. The Central Command Defcon level is at a 2 again. We have a lot to discuss, so let's get started in the Euro Command or European Command. In the European Command on September 29, 2022, multiple reports that the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant was on fire and that power unit number 6 was damaged. Energodar's official channel says that these reports are false. Official-looking Telegram channel transcripts are being passed around social media, but Energodar has rejected the claims. Russian state media have also reported that the claims are false. Energodar official statement: as of 1540 on the 29th of September 2022, no fires and ignitions were recorded at Zaporizhia NPP power units. False information about a fire at the second power unit of ZNPP is being spread in Telegram channels. We officially inform that this is not true. As of 1540 on September 29, 2022, no fires and ignitions were recorded at Zaporizhia NPP power units. We assume that this false information appeared as a result of the following event. The perimeter around Zaporizhia NPP is mined by the Russian military, who are at the station. There have already been 6 cases when these mines exploded due to wild boars, dogs, foxes. Today, another explosion occurred on the perimeter, on the line supplying voltage to the nitrogen-oxygen station from power unit number 6. As a result of the explosion, the line was damaged. Due to a voltage surge, one of the voltage transformers at power unit number 6 was short-circuited with a slight smoke. For safety reasons, a fire brigade was called, but it was not necessary to use it. Because it was not necessary. So, now the greatest danger is posed by the perimeter of the plant and approaches and entrances to it mined by the Rashists. There is only one way to guarantee complete safety of ZNPP and its surroundings, by creating a security zone. The occupation of the plant and returning it under the control of the state of Ukraine. We do have confirmation that Ukraine is applying for NATO aka North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Here is what Ukraine has stated. Ukraine applies for NATO membership. Ukraine has said that they are officially submitting an application for membership to the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said in a speech, de facto, we have already become a NATO ally. We trust each other, we help each other, and we protect each other. This is the alliance. Today Ukraine submits an application to make this de jure. Our accession would be a formal solidifying of the real state of things we've already achieved. Ukraine's Ministry of Defense stated, today Ukraine is submitting its application for NATO membership. We are taking our decisive step by signing Ukraine's application for accelerated accession to NATO. As we are continuing to monitor any further potential of World War III, and speaking of that we have a lot of reports to show you for World War III, as several news stations are saying we are already in World War III or that World War III has begun. Trump says Biden will start World War III. On Saturday, September 24th, 2022, Trump says Biden will start World War III. On Saturday, September 24th, 2022, at 7:09 a.m. Trump says Biden will start World War III. Donald Trump said he hopes is wrong about the possibility of World War III because the U.S. is being run by stupid people at a rally in North Carolina, the Daily Mail reports. Said Trump, I was right about Ukraine. I was right about what? Taiwan, and I'm hoping I'm not going to be right about World War III because we have stupid people dealing. He added, you could end up in World War III and this will be a war like we've never had before. Won't even be close because we're being run by stupid people. On Monday, September 29, 2022, at 7:31 am, this article came from Daily Star in the On Monday, September 29, 2022, at 7:31 a.m. This article came from Daily Star in the United Kingdom. Eric Cantona fears World War III is closer and closer, with history repeating itself. Manchester United icon Eric Cantona fears World War III is near as history is repeating itself before the outburst of the last World War. Cantona echoed his fears with the cost of living crisis and rise of nationalism across Europe, a similar trend to the late 1920s and early 1930s. Speaking to The Athletic, Cantona said, "Not only France, many countries, Britain, Germany, Hungary, Italy, Spain, everywhere. The danger is that if we go back to 1929, after the crisis of the stock market crash in 1933, Adolf Hitler was elected and it was a world war. Little by little, we become more and more nationalist." He continued, "Everything is the fault of the foreign guy, of the immigrant. This is because nobody will accept responsibility. So it is always framed as the fault of the weak ones, so it is always the fault of immigration. When the country is good, we say that is because of everybody. But when it is the bad times, it is always the fault of immigration. After that, it is world war. I hope there will not be a world war. I hope so. But we are closer and closer and closer every day." Correction, that article was from Daily Star on September 26, not the 29th. On Tuesday, September 27, 2022, at 5:46 p.m., Trump warns of possible World War III over Ukraine and Taiwan. Former President Donald Trump warned Tuesday that World War III could erupt over Ukraine or Taiwan, and said Russian President Vladimir Putin's threat of unleashing nuclear weapons made this a very bad and very dangerous time. During an appearance on 77 WABC radio, Trump was asked by host John Katzimatidis what things keep you up at night. I think more than anything else. I think we could end up in World War III and it could be all of the horrible things that took place in Ukraine, he said. Looks like it's going to happen in China with Taiwan, as you know. And you see what's going on over there. Trump also alluded to Putin's speech last week in which he vowed to use all the means at our disposal to protect Russia and our people. I think we're at the most dangerous time maybe in many, many years, maybe ever, because of the power of nuclear, Trump said. For a major nation that's equal with us on nuclear power to be throwing around the word cavalierly, like nuclear, is a very bad time. A very bad time for this country and a very bad and a very dangerous time for the world. Trump also agreed with Katzimatidis' suggestion that if he were still president, Putin wouldn't have invaded Ukraine earlier this year. I got along with him very well. I spoke to him. I understood him, Trump said of the Russian leader. He understood me, probably. But I understood him well, and he would have never done it. Without mentioning President Biden by name during the 20-minute, pre-recorded interview. Trump also blasted last year's botched U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan before launching into a series of attacks. A lot of things don't make sense, he said. Inflation doesn't make sense. Totally unnecessary. That was caused by oil. That was caused by energy prices. Now it's caused by everything. Now it's beyond that. Trump also said that open borders don't make sense, adding, we have millions of people pouring into our country. We have no idea where they're from and many of them come from prisons from lots of other countries, he said. They're prisoners and they're hardened, dangerous people. After Katzimatidis brought up the subject of fentanyl, which helped fuel a record 107,622 overdose deaths in 2021, Trump said, I think what's happened is the number is a lot higher than that. I think it's 250,000, he said. And that doesn't include all the families that are just totally destroyed because of the drugs pouring through the southern border. Trump added that the only way you're going to stop it is to have the death penalty for drug dealers. If you look at countries where they have, like China, they have the death penalty, they have no drug problem, he said. Singapore, they have the death penalty. They have no drug problem. You're never gonna stop drugs unless you have the death penalty. Trump also said that New York City is not the same place, it was due to rising crime. Saying people are afraid to go to a restaurant. Women are afraid to put on jewelry because it's going to be stolen right off their necks. I have so many friends that don't want to go there anymore. And they're leaving New York, he told Katzimatidis, the billionaire owner of the Gristede supermarket chain. You're saying you're one of the people that are staying, but people. And you have a lot of wealthy people leaving New York and they're the ones that give it the money so that it can function. At another point, Trump said he hoped that there'll be a time when we can be proud instead of just being talking about how bad things are. But our country has never been in a worse position than it is right now. And just look at the stock market, he said. Tell your listeners to take a good look at their 401 kiloseconds, which are down in some cases 50% from what they were 2 years ago. So, you know, it's very sad to see what's happening to our country. Trump also lashed out at State Attorney General Letitia James, who last week filed a $250 million civil fraud suit against him and his 3 eldest children, calling her a disaster and blaming her for surging crime across the state. She spends years going after me that she said, "Oh, I may be misrepresented to banks," which frankly, I didn't, he said. And in the meantime, we have murderers going down, walking down the street. It's just horrible. She's a horror show. She's so bad. She doesn't care about violent crime. She doesn't care about anything except trying to use Trump's name to get elected. Here is the video of what former President Donald Trump said.
Beyond Republican or Democrat, I want to see somebody that's great.
You want Joe Biden to succeed?
I would rather have him succeed incredibly, even if it meant a much tougher and maybe even a loss. I want to see what's good for the country. If I had my choice of having this mess that we're having there right now, this country is a mess. Beyond Republican or Democrat, I want to see somebody that's great.
You want Joe Biden to succeed?
I would rather have him succeed incredibly, even if it meant a much tougher and maybe even a loss. I want to see what's good for the country. If I had my choice of having this mess that we're having there right now, this country is a mess. This country is a mess. This country's not going to survive. The way it's going right now, it's not going to.
You'd be willing to go through all the hell that we talk about today, and all that you've been through all these 6 years today, and all the hell that we talk about today, and all that you've been through all these 6 years. The hell that we talk about today, and all that you've been through all these 6 years. Because you put your country first. Is this a calling?
I put the country first, yeah.
Cooking is my...
That article came from New York Post, an American news source. That article came from New York Post, an American news source. On Tuesday, September 27th, 2022. On Tuesday, September 27th, 2022, at 6:34 p.m. This article came from Mail Online, a United Kingdom news source. Trump says prospects of World War III keeps him up at night. Again claims Ukraine would not have been invaded if he was president and tears into disaster, Letitia James in radio interview. It basically tells the same exact information as the other news source. On Wednesday, September 28, 2022, at 6:31 a.m. This article came from news.am, an Armenia news source. Trump warns that World War III could break out over Ukraine or Taiwan. Once again, it shows the same information as the others as previously stated. On Wednesday, September 27, 2022, at 6:32 a.m. This article came from the Epoch Times, an American news source. Trump reveals his biggest fear. Warns we're at the most dangerous time maybe ever. Former President Donald Trump said his biggest worry now is where geopolitical tensions over Ukraine and Taiwan may be headed, saying that he thinks we could end up in World War III, and that the conflict could go nuclear. Trump, in a Sept. 27 appearance on the Cats at Night show, was asked about his chief concerns and what keeps him up at night. More than anything else, I think we could end up in World War III, the former president replied. He said World War III could be sparked by all of the horrible things that took place in Ukraine, adding that it looks like it's going to happen in China with Taiwan. You see what's going on over there. China's communist regime recently ramped up its military threat against the self-ruled island of Taiwan, which Beijing views as its own territory to be taken by force if necessary. China has acted increasingly aggressively when it comes to Taiwan, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said in a recent interview, according to CBS News. That poses a threat to peace and stability in the entire region. Even though the United States ended formal diplomatic ties with Taiwan in 1979 and switched recognition to Beijing under the One China policy, Washington maintains a robust unofficial relationship with Taipei and is legally bound to provide it with the arms necessary to defend itself. Tensions in Ukraine, on the other hand, have taken a turn for the worse as Ukrainian forces launched a major counteroffensive, prompting Russian President Vladimir Putin to mobilize more troops and suggest in a speech on Sept. 21 that Moscow was prepared to use nuclear weapons in the conflict. In his interview, Trump commented on Putin's remarks and the nuclear threat. I think we're at the most dangerous time maybe in many, many years, maybe ever, because of the power of nuclear, Trump said. For a major nation that's equal with us on nuclear power to be throwing around the word cavalierly, like nuclear, is a very bad time. A very bad time for this country and a very bad and a very dangerous time for the world, Trump added. Trump once again expressed the view that if he were still in the White House, Putin would not have ordered his troops into Ukraine. I got along with him very well. I spoke to him. I understood him, Trump said of Putin. He understood me, probably. But I understood him well. And he would have never done it.
Trump reveals his biggest fear. Warns we're at the most dangerous time maybe ever. Former President Donald Trump said his biggest worry now is where geopolitical tensions over Ukraine and Taiwan may be headed, saying that he thinks we could end up in World War III, and that the conflict could go nuclear. Trump, in a September 27 appearance on the Cats at Night show, was asked about his chief concerns and what keeps him up at night. More than anything else, I think we could end up in World War III, the former president replied. He said World War III could be sparked by all of the horrible things that took place in Ukraine, adding that it looks like it's going to happen in China with Taiwan. You see what's going on over there. China's communist regime recently ramped up its military threat against the self-ruled island of Taiwan, which Beijing views as its own territory to be taken by force, if necessary. China has acted increasingly aggressively when it comes to Taiwan, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said in a recent interview, according to CBS News. That poses a threat to peace and stability in the entire region. Even though the United States ended formal diplomatic ties with Taiwan in 1979 and switched recognition to Beijing under the One China policy, Washington maintains a robust unofficial relationship with Taipei and is legally bound to provide it with the arms necessary to defend itself. Tensions in Ukraine, on the other hand, have taken a turn for the worse as Ukrainian forces launched a major counteroffensive, prompting Russian President Vladimir Putin to mobilize more troops and suggest in a speech on September 21 that Moscow was prepared to use nuclear weapons in the conflict. In his interview, Trump commented on Putin's remarks and the nuclear threat. "I think we're at the most dangerous time maybe in many years, maybe ever, because of the power of nuclear," Trump said. "For a major nation that's equal with us on nuclear power to be throwing around the word cavalierly, like nuclear, is a very bad time. A very bad time for this country, and a very bad, and a very dangerous time for the world," Trump added. Trump once again expressed the view that if he were still in the White House, Putin would not have ordered his troops into Ukraine. "I got along with him very well. I spoke to him. I understood him," Trump said of Putin. "He understood me, probably. But I understood him well, and he would have never done it."
On Wednesday, September 28, 2022, at 9:44 a.m. This article came from Online Mail, a United Kingdom news source. U.S. denies preposterous claim they sabotaged Nord Stream 2 as Trump shares video of Biden promising to bring an end to pipeline and asks World War III anyone? The U.S. government is denying preposterous allegations that it is behind a gas leak in the Baltic Sea on Wednesday. It comes as Donald Trump suggested that World War III could be near while sharing a video of President Joe Biden threatening to stop Russia's Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline. Mysterious and alarming leaks were found in both Nord Stream pipelines this week, prompting the European Union to call it the result of a deliberate act. Multiple accusations have already been lobbed at the Kremlin amid ever-growing hostilities over its illegal invasion of Ukraine. Meanwhile, Moscow is pointing the finger at the United States, declaring that Washington is obliged to explain its alleged role in the sabotage. A U.S. official denied the accusations. According to the Washington Post, DailyMail.com has reached out to the White House for comment. Trump also appeared to back Russia's theory on Wednesday when he posted on his Truth Social app a video of Biden from early February pledging to bring an end to Nord Stream 2 if Vladimir Putin's forces invaded Ukraine. Wow, what a statement. World War III anyone? Trump wrote along with the video. The same video was also shared by the Russian government on Wednesday while suggesting Biden was behind the explosions that led to the Baltic Sea leaks. Asked for clarification on his stance, Trump's spokesman Taylor Budovic said, "The statements speak for themselves." He also referred DailyMail.com to an earlier post where Trump offered to lead negotiations between Russia and Ukraine, while warning current U.S. leaders to not make matters worse. U.S. leadership should remain cool, calm, and dry on the sabotage of the Nord Stream pipelines. This is a big event that should not entail a big solution, at least not yet, the former president wrote. The Russia-Ukraine catastrophe should never have happened, and would definitely not have happened if I were president. Do not make matters worse with the pipeline blowup. He ended with, be strategic, be smart, brilliant, get a negotiated deal done now. Both sides need and want it. The entire world is at stake. I will head up group. And just before that, Trump compared the pipeline's gas leak to the potentially devastated storm heading for the state of Florida. He said Hurricane Ian was not as important as the damage in Europe's waters. Everyone is talking about the big hurricane barreling into Florida, as they should be. But perhaps a far more important event in the longer term was the announcement that the Nord Stream 1 and 2 pipelines out of Russia has been sabotaged, he wrote in the earliest of the 3 posts. This could lead to major escalation, or war. In that statement, Trump also stated he brought the pipelines to the world's attention as president when I explained how crippling reliance on it could be for Germany and other parts of Europe. Everybody laughed at the time. But they are not laughing anymore, he wrote. During his presidency, Trump did approve sanctions on the Nord Stream 2 pipeline between Germany and Russia, which was near completion when the penalties were levied in December 2019. Biden waived U.S. objection to the pipeline just several months into his White House term. But it was soon halted again, this time by Germany, whose government canceled the plans in opposition to Russia recognizing parts of eastern Ukraine as independent pro-Kremlin states. Putin launched his invasion just a few days later. Nord Stream 1 was similarly out of operation due to Russia's war on Ukraine. Though Nord Stream 2 never begun operations, it was full with gas by the time it was halted. Climate scientists fear the repercussions of the leak could be disastrous. Sharing Biden's early February warnings on stopping the pipeline, the Kremlin's foreign ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova said on social media, Biden is obliged to answer the question of whether the U.S. carried out its threat. We must be responsible for our words, the Putin puppet said, according to the Associated Press. Europe must know the truth. On Wednesday, September 28, 2022, at 11:52 a.m. This article came from Newsmax, an American news source. Former President Donald Trump slammed President Joe Biden for previously appearing to promise the start of a world war if Russia invaded Ukraine. Russian President Vladimir Putin began an unprovoked attack on Ukraine February 24, less than 3 weeks after Biden said the U.S. would prevent Nord Stream 2 from becoming operational if Russia invaded Ukraine. Trump, via Truth Social on Wednesday, shared a transcript of Biden's February 7th comments. But how will you do that? Exactly, since the project is in Germany's control, the president was asked. I promise you, we will be able to do that, Biden said. Trump on Wednesday shared an ABC News transcript and said of Biden's promise, "Wow, what a statement. World War III anyone?" Late last month, Trump blasted the Biden administration for not containing Putin and for possibly putting the world on the brink of a nuclear World War III. President Putin of Russia is now threatening the use of nuclear weapons. Saying, "It is not a bluff," Trump wrote on Truth Social. The Ukrainian conflict should never have happened and would not have happened if I were president. But as I have made very clear for quite some time, this could now end up being World War III. The Nord Stream 1 pipeline leading from Russia to Europe reported a drop in pressure. Only hours after a leak was reported in the Nord Stream 2 pipeline in the Baltic Sea off Denmark, the German Economy Ministry said. We are investigating this incident as well. Together with the authorities concerned in the Federal Network Agency, the ministry said in a statement late Monday. We currently do not know the reason for the drop in pressure. Leaks in the Nord Stream pipelines from Russia to Europe are a very serious development and highly suspicious. But a full investigation is needed to establish what happened, a Western official said on Wednesday. The official did not blame Russia for the leaks but said Putin should undo his recent series of escalations over the invasion of Ukraine. Especially nuclear rhetoric, the official said, was deeply irresponsible. On Wednesday, September 28, 2022, at 2:29 p.m., Trump offers to broker peace deal between Russia and Ukraine to avoid World War III. Former On Wednesday, September 28, 2022, at 2:29 p.m. This article came from American Greatness, an American news source. Trump offers to broker peace deal between Russia and Ukraine to avoid World War III. Former President Donald Trump on Wednesday offered his services to head up a group to help negotiate a deal between Ukraine and Russia following the likely deliberate explosions that took out both of Russia's gas pipelines to Europe. The entire world is at stake, Trump said. The former president also claimed that the Russian invasion of Ukraine would not have happened if he were still in office. After learning of the leaks on the Russian-owned Nord Stream 1 pipeline Tuesday, Sweden's maritime authority issued the following warning. There are 2 leaks on Nord Stream 1, in Swedish Economic Zone and 1 in Danish Economic Zone. They are very near each other, a Swedish Maritime Administration (SMA) spokesperson told Reuters. Experts say that the destruction of both Nord Stream pipelines was most likely caused by a deliberate explosion, rather than a natural occurrence such as an earthquake. While many in the international media pointed to Russia as the culprit, the Kremlin dismissed those claims, describing the idea that Russia was behind the attack on the Nord Stream gas pipelines as quite predictable and also predictably stupid. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov told reporters that the incident needed to be investigated and that the timings for the repair of the damaged pipelines were not clear. Earlier this year, both Joe Biden and Under-Secretary of State for Political Affairs Victoria Nuland explicitly stated that blowing up the pipelines was something that was very much on the table. Biden told reporters in February that if Russia invaded Ukraine, there will no longer be a Nord Stream 2, we will bring an end to it. When asked how he planned to do that, Biden replied, "I promise you, we'll be able to do it." Wow. What a statement. World War III anyone? Trump wrote on his social media platform Truth Social Wednesday, in reaction to a clip of Biden saying those words. In January, Nuland warned, if Russia invades Ukraine, one way or another, Nord Stream 2 will not move forward. The German magazine Spiegel reported on Tuesday that the CIA warned its counterparts in Berlin earlier this summer of possible attacks on gas pipelines in the Baltic Sea. Everyone is talking about the big hurricane barreling into Florida, as they should be. But perhaps a far more important event in the longer term was the announcement that the Nord Stream 1 and 2 pipelines out of Russia, which I brought to the world's attention as president when I explained how crippling reliance on it could be for Germany and other parts of Europe, Trump wrote on Truth Social. Everybody laughed at the time, but they are not laughing anymore, has been sabotaged. This could lead to major escalation, or war. On Thursday, September 29th, 2022, at 10:31 a.m. This article came from the New York Sun, an American news source. Ahead of Russia's forced annexations in Ukraine, Putin's spiritual henchman warns of World War III. On the eve of Moscow's illegal annexation of 4 Ukrainian regions following a series of bogus referendums orchestrated by the Kremlin there, a Russian nationalist, Alexander Dugin, has accused the West of pushing Russia to the brink of World War III. The bearded, 60-year-old Mr. Dugin is something of a strategic spiritual advisor to President Putin and has been dubbed variously as Putin's brain and a latter-day Rasputin. Mr. Dugin is also notorious for his rabid anti-Western views and is blacklisted by the EU. His uncharacteristic silence since the assassination of his daughter, Daria Dugina, in a car bombing at Moscow last month will now be seen as a mere pause because in his latest screed he lays the blame for Russia's current as well as perceived plight on the West with unusual fervor. Even for a known firebrand, Mr. Dugin calls Ukraine's counterattacks in the Kharkiv region a turning point and a direct blow from the West against Russia. Everyone knows that this attack was organized, prepared, and equipped by the military command of the United States and NATO and was carried out under their direct supervision, he wrote, adding, "This is not a minor success of Kyiv's counteroffensive. This is the first tangible success of NATO forces Drang nach Osten." Drang nach Osten, or Drive to the East, was the name for a 19th century German plan to expand the country into the traditionally Slavic territories to its east, and was a precursor of the notion of Lebensraum that developed under Nazi Germany. Such an evocation by Mr. Dugin feeds directly into the dangerously false narrative that Ukraine is run by neo-Nazis and that the Russia's special military operation is the only way to change the equation in Russians' favor. In his view, Kyiv's recent string of successes simply underline how Russia is at war with the collective West, with NATO and its allies. Although he believes that Turkey, Greece, France, and Italy do not want to actively participate in the war with Russia, for him just about everybody else does. He asserts that America and NATO will no longer be content with a ceasefire and complete withdrawal of Russia from what he terms the former Ukraine. In his view, American military leaders and the NATO General Secretary, Jens Stoltenberg, will only be satisfied with an unconditional surrender and de-imperialization of Russia. That possibility, even though it is not entirely clear what it actually means, is something that in Mr. Dugin's estimation the Kremlin simply cannot brook. Russian philosophical opposition to the West is of course nothing new, but what is alarming is that Mr. Dugin views the Russian attempt to liberate Ukraine's Donbass region as a done deal, and believes that it gradually developed into a full-scale war with the West, in which President Zelensky is only playing a supporting role. Mr. Dugin's stunningly misplaced indignation, which is very much in tune with widely documented past streams of invective, can be seen to mirror that of Mr. Putin. And he is now wielding that perceived wound as means not only to justify the chaotic, partial mobilization of new Russian conscripts now clumsily underway, but as a call for more. To wit, Mr. Dugin believes that Russia itself right now needs to turn into a military base. The implications of such a call are profoundly unsettling. And not only because of the Kremlin's recent escalatory rhetoric regarding the right to use nuclear weapons. It means that even though no Third World War has been declared, some in Russia are already on a global war footing. The alleged Russian sabotage of 2 gas pipelines under the Baltic Sea this week should be seen in this context. So, too, should Finland's decision, announced today, to close its borders to all Russians, even those with visas. Helsinki has now joined Warsaw and the Baltic states in banning Russians. Europe's drawbridges are going up. And the message is clear: if you are a Russian, you are now for all intents and purposes an enemy of the Free West. Mr. Dugin also calls for the immediate abolishment of Russia's peacetime rules, which for him are essentially the blind copying of Western programs and entertainment strategies that do nothing but corrupt society, accusing the West of launching a war of extermination against us. World War III, he says Russians must presently toss any notion of comfort out the window. War and comfort are incompatible. Comfort as a goal, as a reference point in life, must be abandoned, he declares, adding, only nations prepared for hardship can win real wars. On Thursday, September 29, 2022, at 12:29 p.m., this article came from U.S. News and World Report, an American news source. Fears about WWII are growing amid Russia-Ukraine war, survey finds. Russia's unprovoked war with Ukraine recently entered its 8th month, and there are few signs of it ending anytime soon. Rather, the fighting appears more likely to escalate. Russian President Vladimir Putin announced last week that he will push 300,000 reservists into service, and his accompanying speech featured some alarming threats. Referencing, without evidence, that the West is engaging in nuclear blackmail against Russia, the leader noted that his country has various means of destruction and, when threatened, will certainly use all the means at their disposal, according to a translation. This comes after Russia reportedly engaged in provocations near a Ukrainian nuclear power plant in August, which a U.S. Department of Defense official described the height of irresponsibility. A stark new finding from an international survey suggests that the world is taking these threats and their broader global implications seriously. In a survey of more than 17,000 people across the world, 3/4 of respondents agreed with the statement, "I fear we are moving closer to World War III." The findings are culled from the U.S. News and World Report Best Countries Survey, which was fielded this year from April 30th to July 13th and is used for an annual, perception-based rankings of countries. The share of respondents who agreed that we're heading toward global war rose above 80% in 5 countries: Indonesia, South Korea, Spain, Thailand, and the United States. Those surveyed within the age range of 25 to 35 were the most fearful, with 76% worrying about nations moving closer to another global conflict. But Rudra Sil, a professor of political science and the director of graduate studies at the University of Pennsylvania, says that while the findings make sense, he cautions against people being overly fearful. The key word there is closer, which is a relative term, and I think, relative to a year ago, I guess everyone could say we're a little bit closer, Sil says. But would I interpret that as a reason for thinking that Armageddon is coming and that we should all start storing things in our basement? No, I don't see it that way at all. Other experts agree that there's no cause to panic. Kimberly Street Julian Varnon, a presidential doctoral fellow also at the University of Pennsylvania, says she doesn't believe the situation is that dire. Rather, she says, the recent threats from Putin are more of a reflection of Russia's lack of success in Ukraine and sinking global standing. This isn't World War III, this is Russia saber rattling and operating from a position of weakness, St. Julian Varnon adds. This sort of antagonistic posturing from Putin has Cold War roots. Adds Sil, in a semi-optimistic interpretation of the Russian leader's rhetoric. He sees Putin as simply reminding his foes about the concept of mutually assured destruction, a form of reciprocal deterrence. I think they're just basically warning you. An attack on Russian soil is tantamount to an attack on Soviet soil from the old days, he says. Basically, it's a reminder, don't forget, we are a nuclear power. You're acting like we're not. Sil adds that he hopes these threats spur action and some serious agreements on arms control negotiations with Russia. The START treaty between Russia and the U.S., which sets limits on intercontinental range nuclear weapons, will expire in 2026. The whole point of having a nuclear arsenal is to prevent and deter attacks on your soil, Sil says. Beyond that, they basically become a threat to the entire world. On Thursday, September 29, 2022, at 6:50 p.m. This article came from the New Yorker, an American news source. What if we're already fighting the Third World War with Russia? Nuclear blackmail, illegal annexation of territory, hundreds of thousands of Russian men rounded up and sent to the front lines in Ukraine, undersea gas pipelines to Europe mysteriously blowing up. After endless speculation, we can now say it for sure. This is how Vladimir Putin responds when he is backed into a corner. Throughout 7 awful months of war in Ukraine, President Joe Biden has held to a steadfast line when it comes to the Russian invasion. His goal is to help Ukraine win while also ensuring that victory does not trigger a Third World War. But as Russian forces have experienced US-aided battlefield setbacks in recent days, Putin has reacted by ratcheting up the pressure. It's far from clear how Washington will be able to continue to pursue both goals simultaneously, given that Putin is holding Ukraine, and the rest of the world, hostage to his demands. On Friday, Putin plans to affirm the results of what the Biden administration has sternly termed sham referenda, as a pretext to declare Russian-occupied territories in Ukraine part of the Russian state. How could Biden, or the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, or anyone else who believes in international order agree to that? And yet Donald Trump and the growing faction of pro-Putin cheerleaders in the conservative media, Tucker Carlson, I'm thinking of you, are demanding still more concessions to Russia in response to Putin's escalating threats. The other night, Carlson, citing no evidence, blamed the United States for somehow playing a role in attacks on the Nord Stream gas pipelines. Charlie Kirk, one of the most outrageous of the junior Trumpists, speculated that it was a potential midterm election operation, and that U.S. intelligence agencies should be considered guilty until proven innocent, an appalling smear gleefully parroted on Russian state TV. The ex-president, who during his time in office did so much to weaken NATO and undermine American allies while also praising Putin, even offered himself up as a mediator. On Wednesday, in a post on Truth Social, his Orwellian-named social media platform, he insisted, get a negotiated deal done now. Which, of course, is exactly what Putin wants Trump to say. After a Ukrainian counter-offensive in the eastern Kharkiv region this month pushed Russian forces back to their own border, Putin responded with new provocations designed to force the West to the bargaining table, since his exceptionally brutal yet inept application of military force failed to do so. That, at least, is the consensus view of many of America's smartest Kremlin watchers. As Alexander Vershbo, who served as the U.S. ambassador to Moscow during my tenure there as a correspondent for the Washington Post, put it to me, having failed to stop the Ukrainians on the battlefield, Putin is trying to snatch victory from the jaws of defeat by political means. Russia's leader, Vershbo added, hopes that he can weaken the alliance consensus and scare the West into scaling back its military support for Kyiv for fear of precipitating Russian use of nuclear weapons to defend the homeland. The sabotage of the Nord Stream pipelines further reinforces the image of Putin as madman, which might persuade some allies to push for a ceasefire and negotiations that would inevitably mean Ukraine giving up significant amounts of territory. Talk about a bad deal. It seems clear that negotiating now would be an extraordinary concession in and of itself to Putin's barbarism and willingness to threaten nuclear conflict. Yet it's not just Trumpists who have been calling with more urgency for a negotiated peace ever since Putin vowed, in early September, to make use of all weapons systems available to us, and warned. This is not a bluff. Or is it? Over the weekend, Biden's national security advisor, Jake Sullivan, promised a catastrophic response if Putin were to deploy battlefield nuclear weapons in Ukraine. American military officials have no doubt produced many serious options for the United States to consider in such a scenario, including directly entering the war on Ukraine's side, just the Third World War scenario that Biden has been so determined to avoid. Watching all of this, it's hard not to think of how often over the past 2 decades the West has collectively failed to get Putin right, or to get him at all. Over the summer, the Aspen Strategy Group asked me to give a presentation about Russia at war, and what stood out to me in my research was the number of times and variety of ways in which the U.S. and its allies had missed the mark in understanding Putin at critical junctures in his long tenure as Russia's modern czar. On Thursday, On Thursday, September 29th, 2022, at 7:07 p.m. This article came from Business. On Thursday, September 29th, 2022, at 7:07 a.m. This article came from Business Insider, an American news source. The West is already fighting World War III with Russia. Former White House Russia advisor Fiona Hill says, "The West is already embroiled in World War III with Russia but has failed to notice it." Former White House Russia advisor Fiona Hill told The New Yorker. Hill, one of the world's foremost experts on Vladimir Putin's Russia, discussed escalating tensions between Russia and Ukraine's Western allies. Last week, Putin menaced the West with veiled threats about nuclear weapons as the Kremlin staged referendums. Widely denounced as shams in eastern and southern Ukraine regions it's seeking to annex. "We've been in this for a long time, and we've failed to recognize it," Hill said. Putin's remarks have sparked urgent concern that the war between Russia and Ukraine could spill into a wider conflict. President Joe Biden has warned Putin against using nuclear weapons. And according to reports, U.S. intelligence is monitoring Russia for signs that nuclear weapons are about to be deployed. Hill alluded to the fact that the U.S. has backed Ukraine with military aid since the 2014 Maidan Revolution. It led to Russia seizing parts of East Ukraine, annexing Crimea, and a protracted conflict. Russia and the U.S. have also faced off on opposing sides of the Syrian civil war. The Kremlin has launched covert campaigns to subvert Western elections and exacerbate internal tensions. Putin's warning was issued following huge battlefield losses and military setbacks for Russia, with Ukraine recently seizing control of 2,320 square miles of territory from Russia. The loss has prompted Putin to enlist thousands of civilians and reservists into the Russian military and consolidate its control of territory in the Donbas region via e-referendums. Hill addressed the potential the conflict could spiral out of control because of a failure of the opposing sides to read each other's intentions. "The problem is, of course, us misreading him. But also him misreading us," Hill observed. Hill served as an advisor to the Trump administration and has been sharply critical of the former president's policies towards Russia and Ukraine, which she claimed emboldened Putin. On Friday, September 30th, 2022. On Friday, September 30th, 2022, at 7:07 a.m., the West is already fighting World War III with Russia, former White House Russia advisor Fiona Hill says. The West is already embroiled in World War III with Russia but has failed to notice it, former White House Russia advisor Fiona Hill told The New Yorker. Hill, one of the world's foremost experts on Vladimir Putin's Russia, discussed escalating tensions between Russia and Ukraine's Western allies. Last week, Putin menaced the West with veiled threats about nuclear weapons as the Kremlin staged referendums, widely denounced as shams, in eastern and southern Ukraine regions it's seeking to annex. "We've been in this for a long time, and we've failed to recognize it," Hill said. Putin's remarks have sparked urgent concern that the war between Russia and Ukraine could spill into a wider conflict. President Joe Biden has warned Putin against using nuclear weapons. And according to reports, U.S. intelligence is monitoring Russia for signs that nuclear weapons are about to be deployed. Hill alluded to the fact that the U.S. has backed Ukraine with military aid since the 2014 Maidan Revolution. It led to Russia seizing parts of East Ukraine, annexing Crimea, and a protracted conflict. Russia and the U.S. have also faced off on opposing sides of the Syrian civil war. The Kremlin has launched covert campaigns to subvert Western elections and exacerbate internal tensions. Putin's warning was issued following huge battlefield losses and military setbacks for Russia, with Ukraine recently seizing control of 2,320 square miles of territory from Russia. The loss has prompted Putin to enlist thousands of civilians and reservists into the Russian military and consolidate its control of territory in the Donbas region via e-referendums. Hill addressed the potential the conflict could spiral out of control because of a failure of the opposing sides to read each other's intentions. "The problem is, of course, us misreading him. But also him misreading us," Hill observed. Hill served as an advisor to the Trump administration and has been sharply critical of the former president's policies towards Russia and Ukraine, which she claimed emboldened Putin. On Friday, September 30th, 2022, at 10:05 a.m. This article came from Political Wire, an American news source. What if we're already fighting World War III? Susan Glasser, nuclear blackmail. Illegal annexation of territory. Hundreds of thousands of Russian men rounded up and sent to the front lines in Ukraine, undersea gas pipelines to Europe mysteriously blowing up. After endless speculation, we can now say it for sure. This is how Vladimir Putin responds when he is backed into a corner. Throughout 7 awful months of war in Ukraine, President Joe Biden has held to a steadfast line when it comes to the Russian invasion. His goal is to help Ukraine win while also ensuring that victory does not trigger a third world war. But as Russian forces have experienced US-aided battlefield setbacks in recent days, Putin has reacted by ratcheting up the pressure. It's far from clear how Washington will be able to continue to pursue both goals simultaneously, given that Putin is holding Ukraine, and the rest of the world, hostage to his demands. On Friday, September 30th, 2022, at 2:12 On Friday, September 30th, 2022, at 2:12 p.m. This article came from Ukrainska Pravda, a Ukrainian news source. Medvedev threatens world with beginning World War III and disappearance of significant number of Ukrainians. Dmitry Medvedev, the deputy chairman of the Russian Security Council, believes that Ukraine's accession to NATO will accelerate the outbreak of World War III. Source, Medvedev, on Telegram quote, Zelensky wants to join NATO as soon as possible. Great idea, just begging the North Atlantic Alliance to speed up the start of World War III. Details. Medvedev also commented on the words of NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg that if Ukraine stops fighting, it will disappear as a state. What a cynical boy, after all, if he does not stop. Then a significant number of Ukrainians will disappear, the official of the aggressor country claimed. At the same time, he did not mention that part of the Russians would disappear in such a case. 2. Previously, on Friday, President Volodymyr Zelensky announced that Ukraine had filed an application to join NATO under the fast-track procedure. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg, in fact, avoided replying to the question whether he supported Ukraine's application on joining the alliance under the fast-track procedure.
To help answer that question, let's ask Colonel Doug McGregor, a retired U.S. Army colonel, and he joins us now. Colonel, great to see you this evening. Just a whirlwind, whiplash of news today when it comes to Russia and Ukraine. What should we make of it?
Well, not quite what Senator Graham had to say, or for that matter, President Biden. The destruction of the pipeline was clearly not executed by Russia. No one believes that. In fact, the German population is being polled and overwhelmingly is opposed to the notion of any war with Russia and dismisses out of hand the notion that the Russians are responsible for the pipeline. I think three things are what we're dealing with right now. First of all, Putin has decided that no one in Washington will negotiate with him, and he knows that Washington is ultimately in control. And so he's decided that in response, he's got to escalate the military operation. People aren't aware of it in the West, but the Russian forces in Ukraine have always been outnumbered from the day they entered Ukraine. That's going to change rather dramatically. And I suspect the bombers that you referred to, who carry both conventional or nuclear weapons, will have conventional arms. And those bombers are probably going to be used in the escalation that we're about to witness in Ukraine. And I think he's going to settle this dispute in Ukraine on terms that are acceptable to Russia that we may not like. But other than Poland, no one in NATO is interested in going to war with Russia. If we persist on this line, we will see NATO dissolve and fragment.
Because they will assume, you're saying they will not follow Poland's lead, not stand together. I assume that's what you're saying, Colonel?
Of course, absolutely. No one wants to go to war with Russia other than the Poles and a few people in Washington, D.C.
Well, that will be the key. That will be the key, whether or not, if the world will not follow the Poland into war with Russia, will, in fact, the leaders of the United States of America push the world into war with Russia. Colonel Doug McGregor, always great to hear from you. Thank you so much.
Subscribe to the Fox News YouTube channel to catch our nightly Open.
Breaking news. Breaking news. On Friday, September 30th, 2022, at 6:11 p.m. This article came from Unheard, a United Kingdom news source. Is China about to turn on Russia? President Xi can't afford to isolate the West.
Narrated by Noah. Listen to more of the world's best journalism on the Noah app or at newsoveraudio.com.
For Noah, this is Martin Buchanan reading from Unheard, where on the 1st of October 2022, Nathan Levine writes, "Is China about to turn on Putin?" After managing a strained smile and handshake for the cameras, President Xi Jinping walked away from his recent encounter in Uzbekistan with Russia's Vladimir Putin with a face like ice. By most accounts, the meeting between the two leaders, who once spoke of each other as best friends and bosom buddies, was frosty. In a remarkable admission, Putin acknowledged that the Chinese leader had arrived with questions and concerns about the course of Russia's war in Ukraine. Putin promised to better explain our position on this issue, although we have talked about it before. Instead, in the last week of September 2022, Putin chose to escalate further, announcing the mobilization of 300,000 reservists in an effort to salvage Russia's position, as its forces flounder in the face of a sweeping Ukrainian counter-offensive. The mobilization, along with accompanying threats to use nuclear weapons if Russian territory is endangered, is unlikely to have improved Xi's mood. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman Wang Wenbin immediately called for a ceasefire and stopping the war. Foreign Minister Wang Yi later pressed for mediation and every effort to strive for peace in the conflict, while China's ambassador to the UN, Zheng Jun, urged de-escalation and a political settlement as soon as possible. China's frustrations with Russia are clearly growing. The conflict has left Beijing in an exceptionally awkward position. A short, sharp war that toppled the pro-Western Ukrainian government, i.e. what Putin appears to have originally expected, would undoubtedly have been a big win for China, severely undermining the unity and influence of the Western liberal order that Beijing also seeks to overturn. It's possible this was the bright future Xi was told to expect, when, just before the war, Putin met him in February, and the two leaders signed a joint statement declaring there were now no limits to the China-Russia partnership. Fast forward to today, however, and the protracted conflict and the exposure of the Russian army's simultaneous weakness and brutality has turned into a serious headache for China. Diplomatically, Beijing has attempted to straddle the fence on the war by supporting Russia rhetorically and morally, even as it refrains from providing it with any of the real material support Moscow has begged for with growing desperation. Russia has had to settle for shoddy second-hand armaments from North Korea and Iran, instead of the high-tech kit from China that it probably expected to receive. Even Washington has, almost grudgingly, admitted that China has so far complied with its sanctions on Russia. The distinctly materialist, Marxist, Leninist Chinese Communist Party, or CCP, probably assumed its response would be appreciated around the world. Instead, no one is happy. The West has reacted with outrage that China hasn't openly denounced Russia, while the Russians doubtless privately seethe with a sense of betrayal, having discovered that our Chinese friends are tough bargainers, as Putin let slip. Overall, the war is increasingly becoming into a diplomatic disaster for Beijing, helping to drive perceptions of China to record lows around the world. In particular, it has shattered previously close ties with Europe. The European Union is now preparing a series of measures targeting forced labour and economic coercion that are likely to limit the EU-China trade relationship. Even the once reliably friendly, some might say naive, Germans are now rapidly rethinking their tight economic relationship with China. The newly elected Giorgia Meloni, soon to be Prime Minister of Europe's third largest economy, is also a ferocious China hawk, who has pledged to reconsider Italian support for China's Belt and Road Initiative and make Taiwan an essential concern for Italy. Meanwhile, once enthusiastic countries in Eastern and Central Europe, led by the Baltic states, have begun to drop out of diplomatic and economic arrangements with Beijing. And with the advent of the war worsening existing concerns about Xi's draconian zero-COVID policies, China has begun to rapidly lose its allure as an investment destination for European companies overall, as EU Chamber of Commerce President Jörg Wuttke recently pointed out. For Xi, this could not come at a worse time. China is facing an exceptionally challenging economic outlook, including a worsening real estate crisis, a debt bubble totaling at least 300% of GDP, an unprecedented level of capital flight, and a youth unemployment rate already over 20%. Not to mention the damage inflicted by rolling COVID lockdowns. China simply cannot afford to lose additional trade and investment right now, especially from an economic partner as large as Europe. Meanwhile, the broader inflationary and recessionary pressures unleashed by the war and Western energy sanctions threaten to badly limit the market for exports worldwide, at the very moment they are most needed by China's struggling economy. Worst of all, China is only 2 weeks away from the 20th Party Congress, the defining event of the Chinese Communist Party's cutthroat internal politics. Held only once every 5 years, this will be the moment the party's next top leadership is selected, and the moment Xi makes a bid to remain in power beyond his allotted 2 terms in office, potentially setting himself up to rule for life. For 10 years, Xi has plotted and maneuvered to make this opportunity possible, and all he needs now is some stability and the chance to maintain a cultivated image of steady, all-knowing competence. But Putin has helped dash Xi's hope for an uneventful 2022, opening a chink in his carefully crafted armour. In the last week of September, wild rumours that a coup had deposed Xi swept the internet. Elite military units under the command of a 105-year-old politician had taken over Beijing and placed him under house arrest. Military convoys were on the move across China, flights cancelled around the country were the result of mutinies or military manoeuvres, not the weather. One of Xi's rivals was about to take charge, or maybe the whole regime was about to collapse. All of this speculation was baseless, and Xi soon reappeared to pointedly lead all his top colleagues around a museum exhibit on forging ahead in the new era. But the fact that the rumours seemed plausible to so many speaks to a growing view, inside as well as outside China, that events and his own policies may have left Xi vulnerable, or even cost him the mandate of heaven. Even so, Xi remains in little danger of failing to secure a 3rd term, let alone falling from power. The analysis of a new database of CCP power networks demonstrates just how completely Xi and his loyalists have managed to seize and consolidate control over the 3 crucial levers of hard power in China's Leninist system, what Mao Zedong famously described as the gun, the military, the pen, the propaganda organs, and the knife, the security and intelligence services. However, Xi may be increasingly vulnerable in a different way. While his own position appears relatively unthreatened, the same can't be said for his plan to pack the Politburo, the CCP's top 25 leaders, with his protégés and factional allies, ensuring his path to lifetime rule and completing his personality cult. Xi's economic mismanagement and strategic misstep of personally linking himself too closely to Putin have made him and his political faction exposed to internal criticism in a manner that was almost unthinkable even 2 years ago. Xi had clearly hoped to replace his most obvious rival, Premier Li Keqiang, China's second-ranked leader, with his personal protégé at the party congress. But this now looks substantially less probable. It is now more likely that Xi will have to compromise by accepting the elevation of Wang Yang, a senior leader connected to Li's faction, to this position, as well as permitting the promotion of other reform-minded economic technocrats more sympathetic to Li throughout the system. There has also been evidence in recent months that pro-Russian cadre within the diplomatic corps are beginning to be sidelined in favour of more pro-Western figures. The formerly high-flying and vocally pro-Russian Le Yuchen, who was once seen as a shoo-in as China's next foreign minister, was suddenly demoted this summer and removed from the foreign affairs system entirely. Those who have emerged as the most likely replacements for the position, including Ma Zhao, Xie Feng, and Liu Jie, all have deep career ties to Europe, the United States, and international institutions, such as the UN. All this points to the possibility of an impending turn in Chinese policy. This doesn't mean Xi is likely to throw Putin under the bus anytime soon. Their high-profile friendship would make doing so disastrous for Xi's credibility. But Xi's patience with Moscow is clearly wearing thin. When Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu blithely declared on television last week that we are at war not only with Ukraine and the Ukrainian army, but with the collective West, faces in Beijing must have grown pale. This is not something China can afford to be prematurely dragged into right now. Instead, whether under pressure from other political factions within China or not, Xi currently has an incentive to stabilize relations with Europe and the United States as much as is still feasible, and to seize on all available sources of growth for the Chinese economy, at least for the coming year. By contrast, he has little incentive to be generous with Moscow. Now that Russia has been largely cut off from Western markets and suppliers, it needs China a lot more than China needs Russia. Ultimately, the year ahead will be one in which Xi prioritizes stability over all else, as China and the world ride out a period of significant turmoil. And he must ensure China's ability to come out the other side of that turmoil with the strategic breathing space necessary to successfully compete with the United States in a more divided, but for now still globalized world. His political life depends on it. It's at least conceivable, then, that Xi could very well begin to privately pressure Putin to find a way out of the war and back to some semblance of global stability. Even if he doesn't, unless Russia can turn things around in a hurry, Beijing is more likely to try to cut its losses and take measures to selectively distance itself from Moscow, as it prepares to make the best of a world in which Russian power and influence are significantly reduced. We may have already seen an example of this 2 weeks ago, when Xi, just ahead of his meeting with Putin, flew to Astana and pledged that China would resolutely support Kazakhstan in the defense of its independence, sovereignty, and territorial integrity, effectively evicting and replacing Russia as the Central Asian state's security guarantor and patron. China did not sign up for the massive blunder Putin's adventure in Ukraine has become, and Xi no doubt wishes the whole affair could simply go away. But Russia's flailing means he will face an increasingly stark choice. Either continue to draw away from Russia and its mess, or pivot dramatically and unleash enough Chinese military assistance to make sure Russia can win decisively, setting up an epochal clash with the West. Fortunately, all signs point in the direction of the former. You are listening to Unheard, where Nathan Levine writes, "Is China about to turn on Putin?" This article was published on the 1st of October 2022 and was read by Martin Buchanan for Noah.
Breaking news. On Friday, September 30th, 2022, at 7:35 a.m. This article came from Ukrainska Pravda, a Ukrainian news source. 50 countries call on Russia to withdraw its troops from Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. 50 participating countries of the IAEA General Conference have signed a joint statement calling on Russia to withdraw its troops from the territory of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, ZNPP, and stop the nuclear blackmail. Source: Press Service of Energodom, the national nuclear energy generating company of Ukraine. Details. Thus, 50 states participating in the 66th IAEA General Conference strongly condemned Russia's actions against nuclear facilities in Ukraine and called on the Russian Federation to immediately stop any interference at Ukrainian nuclear sites. The document emphasizes that the seizure of the ZNPP by Russian troops is the root cause of the existing threats to nuclear safety and physical protection in Ukraine. The plant should stay connected to the Ukrainian power grid as an integral part of the Ukrainian energy system, the statement reads. The conference participants also noted that any rigged referendums held by the Russian Federation within the internationally recognized borders of Ukraine will not have a legal or political impact on the status of the nuclear power plant or the surrounding territories. We once again call on the Russian Federation to immediately stop all actions against nuclear facilities and at nuclear facilities in Ukraine so that the Ukrainian competent authorities can restore full control over all nuclear facilities within the internationally recognized borders of Ukraine to ensure their safe and reliable operation, as well as to ensure that the IAEA safely and fully carries out its activities to verify guarantees in Ukraine, the joint statement reads. The document was signed by several countries, including the EU member states, the United Kingdom, the United States, Japan, Australia, Ukraine, Africa, and the European Atomic Energy Community, Euratom. Previously, Poland said it would call for Russia's exclusion from the IAEA if it does not withdraw its troops from the ZNPP. The International Nuclear Energy Agency, IAEA, started a series of negotiations regarding the creation of a nuclear safety zone at the ZNPP, which has been occupied by the Russian military since March 2022. Ekonomikna Pravda. That's all I got for now. I will continue to keep everyone up to date on the latest information. Remember, in case of a nuclear attack or if Remember in case of a nuclear attack or if World War III happens, please make sure you know where to go and an emergency list. Remember, in case of a nuclear attack or if World War III happens, please make sure you know where to go and have an emergency list and follow all rules, regulations, protocols and or orders if a nuclear attack if World War III were to occur. I will continue to monitor this very closely and carefully as we progress through World War III.